It's the Cannon Sports Podcast. On today's episode, we're joined by the head coach of the Heritage Christian Basketball Program, Paul Tait. Welcoming everybody to the Cannon Sports Podcast. I'm Phil George, and I am excited to say that it is basketball season. We've been in the heat of CIF football, but now we're going ahead and pivoting to basketball. And joining us on the Cannon Sports Podcast for our first basketball show of the season is the head coach of Heritage Christian, Paul Tait.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show. Before we get started, would you like to introduce yourself? Let us know who you are and your background.
All right. Paul Tait. Grew up right here in the San Fernando Valley. Actually attended Village Christian, our rival now. Went there K through 12 and coached actually there. Tried to play for a second in college and coached there at Village and grew up here in the Valley, and then we'll kind of talk more how I ended up here, I guess.
So you're Valley born and raised,
Yep.
and it's a great place to grow up. I grew up in the Valley as well, and it's
Yep.
especially a great place for basketball, a great culture
Absolutely.
around basketball, and a lot of high-level players that have come out of this region.
Yep.
Go ahead and speak to that, kind of your experience growing up in the culture of basketball that we're blessed to have down here in the Southland.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I went to school down the street at Village Christian. And at that time, they didn't have state titles and CIF titles. They won one last year. But it was a great environment. My dad played there. Cousins played there. And all around me, guys like Gilbert Arenas were, I think one of my claim to fames is he was averaging like 39 points a game, and I was a junior averaging like 20. So I was like third in the Valley in scoring. But it was Gilbert Arenas and Reuben Douglas who ended up playing in college as well somewhere. So there was just a great basketball history already here. And then growing up and being able to coach eventually against some top-level players was kind of exciting. So tried to play college basketball for a little bit. I think it's actually helped my story as a head coach to let guys know there's different levels. 5'11", 6 foot, could score a little, could play a little, but nothing like the level of the guys that we have here even or anything. And so got some Division II NAI interest, but my pride and ego got in the way. Tried to play in junior college and played for a little bit for Rocky Moore at Pasadena City College before I hurt my knee, and kind of opened the door to coaching. And I think those lessons in life have helped me, as well as my time coaching Division III on the East Coast, for guys to understand that it's not D1 or bust. There's a lot of other ways to stay involved in the game, and then even get into coaching like myself.
Since those days where you were coming up as a player and early on in your coach, what would you say are some of the most significant ways that it's evolved on the West Coast?
I think here on the West Coast, I think the emergence of trainers and individual training. We talk about it, my colleagues, our own coaching staff. Kids today are way more skilled than they were even 10 years ago. And so if you really look at it in the last 20 some odd years since I graduated, the point that parents make to put their kids in individual training, it just has made for some really skilled players. And so then you see guys that came up in the Gilbert Arenas, like I talk about, and others that came after him. You really opened a door for a lot of California kids to start getting a shot at high-level college and eventually in the NBA. And I think even the NBA put some stat out the other day that California has the most active players in the NBA right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so many of those active players are coming out of not just California, but this geographic region
Right.
of California in the San Fernando Valley, some down in Orange County as well, and all fairly recently in the last
Right.
decade.
Right. You're talking about Russell Westbrook, from Russell Westbrook to James Harden, DeMar DeRozan, Jrue Holiday, Justin Holiday, Spencer Dinwiddie, just guys that are in this area that really kind of set the tone for the rest of us. And then I think, we can get into private school, public school a little bit, but there's just this competitive nature. And so you saw some dominant city section schools, and then the rise of even like Sierra Canyon, even in the last, let's call it 10 years now, where
Yeah, and they're churning out NBA talent
Right.
every year.
Right now, yeah. And
NBA legacy talent.
Right, for sure. I mean, we're not even talking about the 4 or 5 guys that they've had go pro in the last few years. I didn't even touch upon that. I was really speaking even towards 10 plus years ago. But yeah, what it's done is it's created, and then we could also talk about transfers too. I mean, we could spin off on a lot of side tales
And we
there.
will.
Okay. So yeah, I think I think all of that combined has really created this pressure cooker, if you will, here in Los Angeles and in the greater LA area. Orange County, I don't want to dismiss them either, but all of it is just from club tournaments to, growing up in the late 90s and early 2000s, it was like, well, there's like 3 club teams in LA and you were good enough to get on their second team. I mean, all love and respect all those club teams, but now some of them have 17 regional teams and everyone's playing club ball, and it's just a year-round sport now, which you've seen the passing of so many multi-sport athletes. You really don't have that anymore. So everything is hyper accelerated right now in basketball here, especially in Southern California.
How do you think things would have been different if those opportunities were available when you were coming up as a player?
I don't want to say they weren't exactly available. I heard a story one time about Casey Jacobson, who was about a year older than me or 2 years older, and he played on 5 or 6 different club teams. So again, but he was the elite of the elite. And so I do think it would have opened more opportunities for guys like myself and others that were in that. I wouldn't even say I'm in the next tier after Casey. I'm probably 2 tiers after that or whatnot. But guys to really, I think of club programs like BTI. They just took an academic tour, and West Coast Elite does a good job of that, of opening West Coast Southern California kids into other parts of the country for NAIA schools and Division II and Division III. And so I just think 20 years ago, it was like, well, if I can't play at UCLA or USC, then I'll try Pepperdine or CSUN. Nope, that's still Division I. You're not going to play there still. So I do think the evolution of club basketball and travel basketball, there's been problems with it, but I think for the most part, it's helping kids get to that next level as well.
You actually had the pleasure of coaching a few of those guys that were fortunate enough to reach the NBA level. You had Jrue and Justin Holiday at Campbell Hall. Yep. They've gone on to have standout NBA careers, as well as Spencer Dinwiddie at Taft. What was the experience like coaching those guys and the handful of others that you've had to coach? And more specifically, when you have an NBA guy at that level, what makes them stand out in high school?
Right. Well, at the time, I didn't know they were going to be NBA guys, but looking back now, there was definitely conversations, work ethic, things like that. Really how I got to coach Campbell Hall, I was actually back at my alma mater coaching Village, and I really love putting tournaments together. I put fall leagues together, summer leagues together, and this coach, Terry Kelly, was at Campbell Hall, and was like, man, I would love to hire you. And I was still a young coach. I wasn't ready to be a head coach. And through dumb luck, I ended up at Campbell Hall. And he hired me, I think, originally in the first month to be the head freshman coach or something like that. And through circumstances that first summer with them, a couple other assistants left. And before he knew it, I was elevated to not second in command, but I was the next guy after the top assistant that was there. And I stayed after. I got shots up with guys, and I was eager to learn. And when you see guys like Jrue, I think back to Jrue's first high school practice. We had a kid named Joe Ford who went to play at Pacific, was the Big West Player of the Year defensively 2 years in a row. And he said, we were doing matchups or whatever, and he's like, I got Joe. And I was like, who in the world does this freshman kid think he is? But it spoke to Jrue's ultimate confidence, and just now Joe tore him apart that day. But throughout the season,
that's how you get better.
That's how you get better. And so I think back to a handful of stories like that about Jrue that made him different. And there's some with Justin that made them different, and then again with Spencer. And so having seen that firsthand, I always tell guys that there's no magic to what I did. I didn't do anything. Jrue and Justin and those guys, they put in all the work. But what I try and share with guys nowadays is, you say you want to get to that next level. You say you want to do this. I'm just speaking from firsthand experience. That's not the way to do it. That's the way to do it. There's no magic blueprint. It's hard work. It's repetition. It's, handling your business in the classroom, being a man of high character, high integrity, which all those guys were, because they knew at some point, if that was the path they were going to go, people are making an investment in you. And we talk about that all the time with college recruiters. They're making $100,000, $200,000 investment in you, even more if you want to get to the next level. So, again, I think being around that and seeing them, now it's easy as I've matured to say, and remember those stories. Like, man, that kid was different because he put in the work. He showed up on time. He did this, A, B, and C. And so I was, again, nothing that I did. I was just fortunate God opened and closed doors in my life at that time, and I was there. So it was cool.
Yeah, now, of course, a player like that, they're blessed with God-given talent. They are the ones putting in the work, like you said. But I'm sure that when you have a player that you've identified that, needs that extra push to get to the next level, what can you do as a coach to kind of foster those attributes that go beyond just God-given talent and bring out the absolute best in a player, whether they're NBA caliber or whether they're just, the guy for right now?
Right. One, you're absolutely right. It's not just the NBA guy. It's any given team. I think back to our first year here, just with a couple guys where you have to challenge them differently. If you're really going to be the leader of a team, you're going to hold them to a different standard. And so I remember even with Jrue as a junior, myself and the head coach, hey, you could dominate doing anything you want out here. How about you limit yourself to no more in 2-hour practice or whatever, no more than 3 turnovers. You can't miss more than 5 shots, whatever. And then Jrue would start playing games with himself and Justin. And Justin was an incredible rebounder in high school. I'm going to get 5 offensive rebounds every practice or whatever it was. And so they were really good about setting their own goals. But then, again, I've translated to, I've got guys right now. I got a point guard right now that I've talked to about, man, you got to have less than 3 turnovers every practice.
And no one's ever going to see those numbers in the stat sheet.
Right, never.
It's never report. It's not going to go up on Max Preps. It's not going to go in the local paper, but and the player knows.
Absolutely. One of my favorite lines I ask guys nowadays is with TikTok and social media and everything else is, if social media didn't exist, would you still want to play basketball? Or are you doing it for the likes, for the fame, or whatever it is? And so it can't be about stats. It has to be more about the process of how you get there. And myself and the coaching staff, and we'll get into my coaching staff later, but we don't ever talk about wins and losses. We talk about the process, the growing and of integrity and character and how we handle ourselves, just as important in the classroom as it is on the court, because winning and losing will take care of itself. But these lessons we're learning are way bigger than basketball. And again, I think when you talk about some of those guys you've talked about and other guys that have gone on to play in college, they've all become successful even off the court in other things, and whether they're entrepreneurs, whether they go into some other different business or whatnot after their basketball careers ended. And so that is just as I'm just as proud of those guys as I am the ones that are still able to be on ESPN and play games right now.
This is actually a conversation that we had with Scott Altenberg. He's the head coach down at Sarah, their football program, and it was the very same conversation. And I asked him, I'm going to ask you the same thing. Is there any one player who comes to mind who, never started in college, never made the NBA, but just had an outstanding career and really became something off the court as a result of the character and the values that you helped instill either here or at any of your other stops?
Yeah, there's actually a couple guys. There's one I think of. He's actually preaching this Sunday at Shepherd of the Hills Church, or Shepherd Church down the street. Caleb Walden was a 6'6" kid that was on the volleyball team that came out to basketball his senior year here, my first year here. And the program hadn't been very good, and I saw this kid jumping, and I was like, you got to come out and play volleyball. And he actually went off to Bible school and became a pastor and married and just had he's succeeding in life elsewhere. I think of Graham Bosley is assistant coach at Longwood right now. He's been under Shaka Smart. He's been at different places. He was a role player his first 2-3 years in high school at Campbell Hall. And then his senior year, he was a senior with Justin Holiday. Was kind of like that 6th, 7th man for us. Came in, knocked down some big shots, averaged like 6-7 points a game. But he was just a great team leader. He was an unbelievable person. Went to Wisconsin and was a manager for 4 years with Bo Ryan. And then, he's been a Division I assistant coach now for, I don't even know how many years now, 10 years or whatever. Still a humble kid, still a great kid, but it wasn't just about he is in basketball, but for Caleb, for Graham, there's a number of other guys that just kept going in some other direction for good reason. because doors opened. And we talk about that all the time. God's going to open and close doors in your life. And so you've got to be receptive to everything that happens. It's not about the turnover. It's how you handle the response to the turnover. It's not about the bad news in your life. How do you handle that response? How do you deal with adversity and move on? So.
Yeah, and that's really been one of the joys for me personally doing the show and talking to coaches like yourself and everybody else that we've had the pleasure to host here on this platform, is to hear those stories like that. Because yes, for every guy that you put in the next level, to star at the D1 level, star at the NBA or the NFL, there are so many other guys like the ones that you mentioned, and they bring that same level of pride to their coach. They bring that same level of pride of representing the organization.
Absolutely, yeah. Whether they're hitting a shot in college or the NBA, or you're seeing them succeed as a teacher, one in law enforcement, there's just different guys that have gone on to do other things, and it makes you proud.
So switching back to the on-the-court side, we talked about some of the NBA guys that you have coached. Who is the toughest player that our viewers would know that you had to coach against?
He's in the news a lot right now. Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving and DeMar DeRozan probably stick out as the two that we just couldn't. DeMar, we had some answers for. Still got 30. We were able to shut down other guys. The team Kyrie Irving was on, that was when we were at Taft. We played them in the Nike Extravaganza down at Mater Dei. He was with the, was it St. Patrick's School or whatever. Kevin Boyle, who's at Mount Verde, was still there. So they had like Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Patrick Patterson, some other big center, some 7-foot center. But Kyrie was the one that was just, man, I'm giving me PTSD right now just thinking about going into that locker room. At halftime, he had like 27 points, and head coach Derek Taylor and I and the rest of the coaching staff just talking about matchups. And it was like, man, Kyrie is. So we ended up beating DeMar 3 times. We beat Klay Thompson once. There's a couple other guys along the way, but, man, Kyrie just sticks out as like, man, that was really – there was no game plan for him. He was tough.
Yeah, well, I'd imagine that was a heck of a learning experience for your squad as well.
Yes, it was.
So let's get into we won't give you PTSD. Let's go ahead and some of the more positive accomplishments during your assistant coaching tenure. So 6 years as an assistant at Campbell Hall, that resulted in 3 CIF state titles, and 2 years at Taft. In that time, you had an LA City Section championship. What were the hallmarks of those title-winning teams, and how did that experience help position you to have the kind of success that you've had now as a head coach?
Man, there was a lot of great lessons in that 8 years there. That was a lot of fun. I guess I was really young in my coaching career. I was spoiled. I just thought, well, we'll just always play until the section finals, and we're always going to go to the state tournament. And I think our first state title run at Campbell Hall was pretty special. I actually referenced that team for some different things. That team was really committed to one another. We went 32-0. And I think what's incredible about that team, and I still remember this number, we had 14 guys on the team. And out of all the practices all year, there was only 2 that we didn't have all 14 suited up.
Wow.
And I just think with everything we've dealt with COVID in the last couple of years, guys kind of getting out of that, we're seeing higher injuries just because guys were sitting around or they were working too hard by themselves during COVID. And we have 14 guys on the roster right now, and we haven't had a practice with all 14 yet. So the complete opposite. And talking to other colleagues. So I think that stands out, just that consistency of that team. That team in 2007 when Justin Holiday was a senior and Jrue was a junior, that team was, I think we were 33-1, finished like top 10 or top 15 in the country. Our only loss was to St. Andrews in triple overtime the day after Christmas. That was a special team because, again, that team was incredibly close. We went on a bunch of different road trips, stayed together, really built chemistry. And then the Taft team that won the city title, that was a special team too. That was actually Derek Taylor's last year at Taft before he went to St. John Bosco with all those and won a state title. But it was a culmination of kind of getting past Westchester. They had been in our way for a few years, and Ed Azim had done an unbelievable job. And so Derek had already won a couple city titles, but that one was pretty special as well. That was down at the Galen Center, so that was fun.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And then in 2014, you took over this program and, really led a significant turnaround of the program. So prior to you taking over, the program hadn't had a winning season since 2006. Now, since the 2015-16 season, you guys have reached 20 wins or more in all but one season.
Right.
Now, on the football side, we've talked to several coaches who have led, that kind of turnaround with their program, and they've all done it their own way. What was your way? What were some of the, key things that you identified as, needing to make a change or needing to, tweak something a little bit differently, put your own spin on it? What was your immediate approach to taking over the program?
Yeah. I remember coming out here, and you talk about the evolution of high school basketball in Southern California. I'm coming and I'm like, we got to make a practice schedule. We got to do all this. And I remember one LA local reporter called me up and was like, what transfers do you have coming in? And I was like, what are you talking about? I don't have any. And he was telling me all these stories of who so-and-so was getting and who. And I honestly felt, I remember taking the phone call in my office and I thought I was on the freeway going 65 and everyone was going 85 past me. And I was like, oh shoot, we're going to get ran out of the gym. And, I'd only been on the job about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And I'm worried about, got to practice and order uniforms and do all this. And through circumstance over the next couple of weeks, there was people that reached out. They knew I was back in town. I had hired a coaching staff, so they had some connections. And, one thing led to another. We got a couple key transfers, helped us get to double-digit wins, and strength of schedule helped that year. And knowing how to schedule our guys, I knew we were going to get, at that time, Village was on the brink of winning another CIF title. Maranatha had Tyler Dorsey, I believe. Valley Christian had just gone to the state tournament. And so I was like, man, we're just not going to get a win in league. I better find a way to schedule games in between all our league games just to keep the confidence high. And so really the first thing we did here was just find guys that loved basketball. And I loved our seniors that year. They had been through a lot and everything. The schools had merged from Hillcrest and Los Angeles Baptist and become what it is now today with 3 campuses and Heritage Christian. But they had just been through a couple coaches and everything, and it was rough. And so I wanted to give them the reverence of, hey, here's a great senior experience, but you're going to be pushed by these freshmen and sophomores that have come in. And my assistant coach, I found him actually at Jrue Holiday's camp up the street at Shepherd Church. I was a speaker there for one of their lessons with Jrue and this guy named Todd Wilson. He had coached at Campbell Hall a year, and he was a local trainer. And we went to lunch, and I remember I hired him on the spot. And I was like, man, you got to come with me. These kids don't know what they're doing. You got to teach them to dribble. You got to do everything with them. We got to figure out how to build this thing. And I remember the NBA Finals were on in June, and just no one was even watching the games. I'd come into practice the next day and be like, hey, did you see so-and-so do this? And they're like, huh? I was like, man, we don't even have a basketball culture here. And so Todd Wilson, fast forward 8 years later, he's actually the best man at my wedding and one of my best friends. And he just put his whole heart and soul into teaching these kids. And we found 5 kids that just changed the culture of this program. And then the next year, got a key transfer in Jawan Harris Dyson, who ended up going to Cal. He's playing in Germany now. And that really just springboarded everything these last 8 years was finding, and now you can't find 30 guys in the program. They're all watching college basketball this weekend and NBA and everything else. It's just, it kind of changed the culture here.
So on the topic of the transfer game, obviously there are, at any program you run into a few different types of coaches. There are the ones who, they engage in the transfer game, but they don't really like to talk about it that much. Then there are others who straight up, don't really like to go that way at all. And then there are others who just lean into it. And it sounds like once you figured out that was something that you had to do, that you were in that latter group that really leaned into it.
Yeah, it's tough because you're trying to build a JV, a frosh. We have middle school here. But, it's crazy. We probably take 2-3 transfers every year. Last year was a big to-do because we took a bunch of these Rebay guys. But the reality is we tell just as many no as well. But the sad reality is you got guys who, through circumstance, aren't happy with maybe their stance here in a program. So they're not 100% committed, and they're like, well, coach, we'll let you know in the spring. We'll sit down and meet at the end of the year meeting, and we'll weigh our options. And so I used to just be like, okay, well, we'll sit back and we'll wait. And now I'm just kind of leaning into it a little bit more like, not a problem. We're not for everyone. I get that. I try and ask families, give us 2 years. Like, don't make that decision after your freshman year. But, kids have options, and I love that they have options. So now when we take that phone call, we just kind of see what it is. If it fits with what we have, we try not to recruit over guys. We really believe if you look at Division I and Open Division, which we're in, or not Open, but we're in Division I with a chance of those top teams are always playing juniors and seniors. And we have such a now mentality in basketball that we've got some really talented freshmen that have come through here, but it's hard to just let them run without some of that senior leadership or that junior leadership. And so I think the way we've kind of established it the last couple of years is we're always trying to bring in 2 or 3 really good freshmen and just keep building it. And if someone leaves and you got to fill a gap, then you play the transfer game a little bit because, again, they're always calling. It's just a matter of whether you're picking up and responding or not. So
one more question on that, and then we'll get into the present day and the current state of the program. What's a good reason to transfer, and what's not the right reason to transfer?
Well, I mean, the easy adage is, well, it's not always greener on the other side. But I do think there's just here you're going to be held accountable for what you do defensively. We have some coaches on our staff, and we'll talk about our staff a little bit, who that is their calling. I lean more on the offensive side, and I've brought guys in to help how do I want to say it? Help my deficiencies, if you will. Because, again, I want to be offense. And offense wins games, but the old adage, defense wins championships. So, for us to get over the hump, we've got to change that culture a little bit. And so we have, I think, in the last year and a half. But if guys don't mesh with the coach, they maybe they should look. Like, I'm not advocating that anyone do that, but part of it is we're not going to handhold you either. You've got to come in, understand what we're doing. We're happy to talk to you about that, happy to talk to your parents about that. And once we do that, then we have to keep moving forward. If you're looking for that hand-holding, it gets a little tiresome because you can't do it with all 15 guys. And, we're not for everyone, I guess. And then there's guys that transfer because, hey, there's just too many point guards or there's too many this or that. I understand that, and so you've got to go to the right fit. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes we have a kid in our program right now who's a sophomore who came here, and he was on our radar, but he's blown up. He's huge. He's going to be a really special player for us the next 3 years. And because of his development, there's other guys that are kind of looking around like, man, am I going to play over this kid?
What is this gentleman's name?
Dylan Shaw. I think Dylan Shaw is a sophomore, and I think he was in our middle school here. We liked him. We knew he was going to be good on JV last year. Was really in that position of like what we thought originally as you're watching him lengthy and gangly at 6'1", 6'2", was like, man, he's going to play JV as a freshman, and then, maybe he plays JV as again, this is a year and a half ago. And he hit the ground running last year on JV, and there was points there in December, January. We're like, all right, you got to come and practice with us. And we were really grooming him to really step into a bigger role this year. And even this summer, he was still trying to figure out who he was. He's 6'6" now, and he's got a couple offers now, and you're thinking, man, this kid's going to be a star any day now. And that's where he's at now. And it caused other guys to transfer out.
Yeah, and as much as some people don't necessarily like it, don't necessarily like to talk about it, it really does seem that a lot of these guys who go that way really do find themselves where they need to be, And there's two sides to the coin. A guy like Dylan, a guy like Seven Bahati, they transfer out of their programs, they come over here, they're in a great spot. A guy like Isaiah Elohim, he leaves here, goes to Sierra Canyon, he's in a great spot, and so are you, are you guys.
Right. Yeah, Isaiah was a special player for us, but at the time, we didn't have a lot around him. We had Malik Moore, who's at Pepperdine right now, and I understood. I don't hold any hard feelings. Isaiah came to a game and watched us a week ago and made sure to grab me afterwards and gave me a big hug. And, he's dealing with some knee things, and he'll be out on the court any minute now. I'm hopeful to see him play again. But, yeah, he ended up at a great spot, and life's too short to sit there and be bitter about someone leaving. It's bigger than basketball.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, so moving into the present day, recapping last season, first place in the Olympic League, 7-1, tied with Village Christian, and you advanced to the second round of the Division I championship bracket and achieved a season-end ranking in the top 20 in the state. Fill us in. What has happened since that time, and what is your outlook for this season that's about to start up this week?
Yeah, I actually had someone on a different podcast ask me last Saturday, what's the one word that describes this team? And I said, youthful. And they're like, oh, that's good. And I'm like, is it?
Is it?
It comes with good and bad. We had a bunch of freshmen on JV like Dylan and a few freshmen that were on varsity last year. They're all sophomores, and that's great. You had to got to get a couple transfers, so we needed some older guys, and we were fortunate enough to get Seven Bahati, who you mentioned already, coming from Donda, super talented player. Then you had Giovanni Gore from Viewpoint and Josiah Johnson from up north at Sheldon. His family actually lived down here, lived up there, and now they're back down here. And so I'm optimistic. I think this team has a chance to be really special shooting the ball. I think they're a very good defensive team when they want to be. But again, when you talk about youthful, there's inconsistencies there. And so we're trying to build on days of consistency. And so Harvard Westlake, who's unbelievable, Dave Rubibo does a phenomenal job with them, and Brady Dunlap, huge fan of his, going to Notre Dame. They beat us by 20 or whatever last Saturday. And so through film session on last Monday, and then these 5 practices this morning, we continued to get better a little bit every day, because I do think it was a wake-up call when Harvard Westlake all of a sudden is up by 6 and then 16 and then 26, and you're like, oh my gosh, is the bleeding ever going to stop? And we did. We ended up having some good moments, but again, there's no consistency. And so I think that's where we're trying to build on this year. So we've got a tough schedule with some fun tournaments and games, and so I think there's going to be highs and lows in any season, and I'm hopeful. Hope is not a strategy, but I am optimistic, I should say, that this team will continue to grow so that when we do have that bump in the road, we'll rebound nicely.
So the term that you just used, days of consistency. What does a day of consistency look like, whether that's in practice, whether that's in a game, and whether that's in a game that you win or a game that you lose?
Yeah, I think the simplest term, when we talk about doing 17s in a minute, so we're going sideline to sideline 17 times in 1 minute. The team can make it. But then all of a sudden last week, they had to stop and run. They weren't even close. And I was like, and Coach Wigington, one of our associate head coach, is like, guys, you just made it yesterday. You couldn't make it today. I'm sure you'll make it tomorrow. That's a lack of consistency. And so that's just a small fraction, but it's that idea, like, why aren't we having ball pressure every time? Are you lazy? Is it a mental thing? Is it a lazy thing? What is it? There's a lack of You can run the offense. You know the offense. Why'd you choose not? Like, we're trying to constantly get them to, what are you thinking and why? And so part of that is just effort and energy level, and then mental toughness. And I think the older guys, Gio and Seven and Josiah, really got into the guys on Monday about, guys, man, we can't have a loss like that again. And so that consistency has been building each and every practice, to the point that we added a practice tomorrow morning, and everyone's like, we got to get after it. We got season start. And I was like, perfect. Like, you guys are getting it.
And I'd imagine that is one of the positives to having a youthful team is those lessons about consistency and those things that you have to apply. You're learning and applying those now at game speed as a freshman, as a sophomore. So when you get to be a junior and senior year, that's not, you're already seasoned vet by that point.
Right, absolutely. We were super fortunate with seniors that understood that last year. A myriad of reasons why maybe we exited early in the playoffs. I won't get into that right now. But when you take away 4-5 guys that are playing college basketball now, that's a big deal. That's a big loss. And so that consistency, I think, even as a coaching staff, we took for granted. And so now we're like, and we have been for 3 months, we've been lesson after lesson. And again, how hard you ride them without breaking their spirits.
So consistency is obviously, I don't even know what the hell I was looking at. Where is it? Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. So consistency is obviously one of the biggest things that you're looking for, but in this first week, it is the first week, right?
Yeah, for this first week, It's coming up, yeah.
Cool. All right, I'm going to start that over one more time. So consistency is obviously the big thing that you look for, but in this first week, tipping off the season with a home tournament, what are some of the other most important things that you're really going to have your eye on to get an idea of who these guys are, what this team is made of before you get into league play?
So I think with a youthful team, if we will, just shot selection. Like what we took way too many threes the other day, way too early. And so are we working the offense? Are we being consistent with how we set one another up and things like that? Defensively, are we not allowing second chance points? And then back to offense, are we valuing the ball? How are we limiting our turnovers? And I'm super optimistic that those things will happen. I think it's Granada Hills right down the street, so that'll be a big opening night game. Then we have more park and pool play, and then, coming out of the other side, I think it's either going to be Valencia or Calabasas that we would play in some type of matchup. So there's some good local teams, and so we want to make sure that we handle our business, play with some consistency, don't allow second chance points, and then really play for each other. I think there was moments in Saturday's game with a lot of people here watching Harvard Westlake, and everyone's trying to show out and be an individual, and it's like, no. You guys didn't do very well when you were individuals, but you held close when you played team defense, when you played team offense. And so I think they rebounded well. Again, another pun there, but they rebounded well this week to really move in the right direction consistency-wise.
And I know it's a faux pas in coaching to look too far ahead onto the schedule, but I'm not a coach, so I'm going to do it.
Okay.
Looking a little bit down the line at some of the big games that you guys have coming up. 2 Olympic League games with Village Christian, your alma mater, the rival, and a late season tournament matchup with Bishop Gorman. Those are going to be some pretty big matchups. How much are you looking forward to those, and how big are those games going to be?
Well, yeah, we were actually talking about it as a coaching staff because we're getting our transportation lined up, and you want to make sure the game day rituals are the same. You're eating at the right times and everything, and you're starting to look at, we play down at Mater Day in December, which is going to be a big game and a big test for our guys. The Bishop Gorman one, I think, is a real chance late in the season, depending on where we are, good or bad, of a wake-up call of like, man, this is a perennial top 10, 25 team in the country. Do we have a chance to win? Where are you? We believe we have a chance to win every game, but do you guys? And so looking forward to that. And the Village games, man, we've split with them 3 straight years, going 1-1. Shared 2 of the last 3 league titles. One year we were fortunate enough that they lost another game in league, so we had it outright. But, a lot of these kids know a lot of their players. They all know that I went there. I try not to talk about it at all because it's not about me. It's about you guys playing. But, again, they have so many friends that go to that school, and we're just 8.5 miles away that it kind of – and they've been super successful. They've done a great job of winning a CIF title last year, I think against Long Beach Poly in 2AA, and so they're up in Division I now with us. So we could see them in league, we could see them in playoffs, down the road and whatnot. So it's an exciting schedule this year, and then we go to Alaska, so that'll be a lot of fun.
Going to Alaska.
We're going to Alaska in January. Surprisingly,
in January.
Surprisingly, rooms are very cheap in January.
I would imagine so.
Yeah, we're fortunate enough to be invited to the Alaska Airlines Classic. St. Joe's out of Santa Maria went there last year, and I kind of said, man, you should mention us. And we actually beat them in a tournament last year, and so he did. He mentioned us. We got the call, and we're going there. We actually fly to D.C. the weekend before, so we got some big puffy coats from Nike the other day, so the kids are all excited to wear those and whatnot. So there's a lot of fun on our schedule and a lot of challenges to set us up for hopefully a longer playoff run than last year.
Yeah, and in addition to the competition, sounds like you're going to be hitting up some pretty cool destinations as well. I hope you and the guys take some time to look around and take in the local sites and the local culture, because those sound like some pretty cool places to spend some time.
Yeah, when we go to DC, we'll do a museum tours and things, and then when we go to Alaska, we're gonna be signed up to do a dog sled tour, so that'll be kind of fun. So exciting stuff.
Well, you're going to need to share some photo and video of that with us.
Absolutely.
So another thing that I wanted to get into, one other item on your resume that we haven't talked about is your time at Springfield. And in addition to being the alma mater, a friend of the show, Tariq Patel, it also holds a very special place in the history of basketball, maybe the most special place in the history of basketball. Speak to that.
Yeah, it's where Dr. James Naismith invented basketball, and he was a student and professor there. And as the story goes, there's a building on campus that was the YMCA, and so they were looking for some type of sport to play during the winter when it was cold there indoors, and thus the game of basketball was invented literally with a peach basket. And there's a statue there, and so it holds a special place. It was a really special time in my life to go out there. Again, having been born and raised here in Southern California, not getting that going away to college experience. I went right down the road to Cal State Northridge. I'd known I wanted to coach college basketball and give it a shot. I wanted to get my master's, and I was coaching with Derek Taylor at Taft, and we went out there to play in the Hoop Hall Classic in January. And I got to meet the head coach, Charlie Brock, at the time, who since is now retired last year. And I stayed in touch with him for a few weeks, and I was dating someone at the time who kind of lived out there, or had family out there, I should say. And so I was like, man, I'm going to go out there and try and interview with this guy and get a job, and ended up getting something. And so the way it works at that school in particular is you're a college graduate assistant or whatever. And so there's one full-time coach and then two assistants that are both getting their master's there and getting a stipend and working for the school. And so I taught, I think it was like racquetball or something. I was a teaching fellow, and then they give you a small stipend so you can live on or off campus and meals, whatever. And so it was a great time. And then just really the understanding of where basketball started, and actually recruiting in the Northeast is actually a really interesting thing as well. And I think, again, another lesson in life that has helped me back here for guys to understand that there's way more than just Division I out there. So.
Well, and one thing that we were talking about before the show, and obviously culture and basketball culture has been a dominant theme of this podcast.
Yeah.
But we were talking before the show about the culture specifically at Springfield and at Northeast, and I had asked you that even though it's a D3 school, even though it's not, on the blue blood level of a Duke or a North Carolina, the basketball culture at Springfield seems to be pretty comparable to what you would expect at those programs.
It really was. I took my wife and I took a road trip this summer, or last spring, and we went out to the Northeast, and I showed her, and she was just like, oh my gosh, this college, they do love sports and they love basketball. They've got this arena that is probably similar to the size of maybe like a Pepperdine. And then they've got two auxiliary courts that have a practice facility. And then they've got an indoor track that has like 8 basketball courts across it. And so it's this idea that, man, basketball is they've got intramural leagues, and like they're so big. Not a lot of people knew this on the West Coast, but some of those Division III schools actually have a JV team as well. So Springfield College has 15, 16 guys on their college team, and then they've got a JV team, which I actually had the fortune of coaching two years out there. So I was not only the assistant, but I pulled double duty because at the time I needed all the money I could get. And so I coached their JV team as well, and you go and play against junior colleges. So the culture of basketball at Springfield College is an incredible place. Just how much they care about sports, how much they care about mind, body, and spirit is actually the theme of their school. So it's whether it's the trainers, whether it's the time they give students to travel for sports and everything was unbelievable. And everyone that comes in there gets to experience a little part of history every time they play a game there.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's so much of a respect and appreciation and a knowledge of that history as well.
Yeah. There's, again, different little plaques and everything to talk about it. And so, and Charlie Brock did a great job being the ambassador and head coach for that program for so many years. I love the man. He gave me that shot to play, and I just thank him for that opportunity, or shot to coach, I should say. But it was pretty cool. And then I got to recruit Tarek out there.
There you go. Okay, so I don't know if they actually do this, but if they don't, they should, or somebody should. I would love to see at Springfield or anywhere else an actual game be played under the 13 original rules of basketball.
Oh, that'd be something, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so I don't know, I don't know if there's any one of the original 13 that comes to mind that you would like to see brought back.
No, I can't off the top of my head think what they were.
Okay, so there's one that sticks out to me. Rule number 3, a player must throw the ball from the spot on which he catches it. Now, unless I'm misinterpreting that sounds to me like we're talking, I catch the ball here, I'm either shooting, passing, no dribbling.
That would be interesting, wouldn't it? That would make for some, I guess it's what we coaches do now when we say, hey, let's play 5-on-5 with no dribble. So I guess that's an interesting rule. I actually remember a league a few years back, I think maybe it was Rob Eichhardt or the BTI teams or whatever. They did a Sunday in the spring, a no dribble league.
Ha.
So I guess that would
similar.
That would be similar, yeah.
Another item, just kind of on topic of Springfield, and we alluded to it, the Division III route. Springfield is Division III, new MAC, and one of the themes that we talk about a lot on this show is exactly that, the not alternative routes of development, but the non-Division I route to development. In today's day and age, obviously, with social media being dominant and all of these ranking services being dominant, everybody wants that D1 offer, that D1 scholarship. And hey, why wouldn't they? God bless you if you can get it. But there are so many Division III athletes, especially in basketball, who have found that route to success. You've got a guy like Duncan Robinson, who transferred from a D3 school, played at Michigan, now is in the NBA. Devin George in 1999, he was the first player drafted in the first round out of a Division III school. So why should an athlete consider all options for their postgraduate play and not just the ones at the D1 blue blood level?
Well, I think what you said is it's not just about playing the game either. I think Brad Stevens even had some type of history with Division III. You talk about Tarek Fattel. Tarek got recruited out there and actually met his wife out there. And so whatever doors open and close, it couldn't be for a reason. And so what kids and families, it's probably more parents than kids actually at this point, that have to understand is it's not just about going to the NBA. It's about what's setting you up for the rest of your life. And so I think so many Division II and IIIs and NAIAs can offer an incredible opportunity and a fan experience. You're there and they put 400 people in an arena and it's great, and they've got this network of alumni and you're going to be taken care of, and I don't mean taken care of with money or anything, but they're going to open opportunities for an internship and a job, and it's where you meet your spouse, it's where you meet your lifelong friends. And so I just wish kids and parents would see the bigger picture than just I have to go Division I or bust. And we've got two kids, our last two graduates here, Tukey Wigington and Kyle Freelo, are playing Division II at UT Tyler in Texas, and they're having a great time. And they could have walked on, or they could have, they were in the middle of COVID during their junior, senior year, so they maybe missed on an opportunity here or there. But there's no regrets. That's the opportunity that opened. And so they're playing for Lewis Wilson out there at UT Tyler. And he was a Division I head coach, Division I assistant for years. And he's coaching a Division II right now. And they're having a blast. And they were super successful last year. So I just think everyone's path is different. And so don't be so closed to other opportunities that may open, would be my advice to any player or any family right now.
Well, and I'll add even another name to that list, Taylor Statham. We had him on the show several months ago. He played his college ball at Cal State San Bernardino. They're a D3 school, had a pretty solid career playing overseas, and now he runs his own academy in Santa Clarita. He's got an AAU team. Yep. So, never played in the NBA, but he is one of many people who went that route who is now instrumental in fostering the next generation of talent, the
100%.
next generation of good character guys in basketball as well. And hey, the game needs those guys.
Right, absolutely. One of our former graduates played Division II somewhere in North Carolina, and he's making $1,500 a month playing in El Salvador, but his rooms are paid for. And so go do that for a couple of years. What an experience. He has his college degree. He enjoyed playing in college, but now he still gets to play basketball. And
right.
So who knows what doors open and close. And so don't be so narrow-minded to just dismiss a Division II, III, NAI, whatever it may be.
Paul Tait, head coach of the Heritage Christian Basketball Program, thank you so much for joining the show. Before we sign off, what do you want to shout out about your program? Tell us why we should all come out to a game here at Heritage Christian.
I think coming out to a game is it's a nice gym. It's not huge. I think it creates a fun environment. We had a bunch of great games last weekend with Notre Dame playing with Dusty Stromer, and so we get some teams that come in here and play, and it creates for a fun environment and an atmosphere. And I think we have a brand of basketball. We've got Tay Simmons, who was an all-league player last year as a freshman with a 40-inch vertical that's going to put on a show now and then. Seven Bahadi, Dylan Shaw. And so there's a lot of guys out there that make us fun to root for, and I'd encourage anyone to come and check out a game.
And I'm going to add one thing onto that as well. Right behind you where we're sitting off camera is a very large stage area. And it is my understanding that is where the drum line is going to hang out during games.
That's what we're hoping. We're hoping to put the drum line. We actually put the cheerleaders up there during the COVID season, but then they can't come down and do their routines. But that was quite the distraction, putting the cheerleaders up there. So I'm hoping with Mr. Hampton up there doing the drum line, that'll be quite a distraction.
Well, I'm a sucker for drum lines, so I, in addition to seeing some great basketball, I definitely want to come and check that out.
Yeah, that should be fun. You hear. I'm sure you'll see it tonight. You're going to Sarah and Sierra Canyon tonight.
Yes, we are.
I'm sure they're going to have a band there. It creates for a high school, college atmosphere and everything, and so that's what we're trying to create here. Our athletic directors do a great job of creating that in the football season this year. They're both new on the job, and so they're talking about all kinds of fun things we're going to do. We're going to do a Jersey Mike's giveaway, half-court shot, free subs for a year, different things like that. So a lot of fun things will be happening, a lot of giveaways, and should be a good time here this year.
Come out and watch some great basketball this year, watch a great drum line, and get some free Jersey Mike subs, make a half-court shot. Paul Tait, head coach of Heritage Christian Basketball, once again, thank you for joining the program, and thank you for tuning in, and we will see you all next time on the Cannon Sports Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe and follow on Instagram at Cannon Sports, TikTok at Cannon Sports Official, and of course, cannonsports.com for all your sporting goods needs.